The following program contains graphic images and language. Viewer discretion is advised.
September 4th, 1995 in Los Angeles. A short week because of the Labor Day holiday. The Dodgers beat the Phillies 5-1. A Walk in the Clouds starring Keanu Reeves is about to be released in theaters nationwide. It's sunny and 83 degrees in LA, but storm clouds of racial animosity and pain are ready to burst. A New York Times cover story reads, "The audio tape bigotry of a former Los Angeles police detective reverberated, not only through the courtroom where O.J. Simpson is on trial, but also through the nation. And so, it is a week unlike any other during the trial. A week during which the murders of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman are eclipsed, as is the grief of their families, by race relations in the country where they lived and died. The People versus O.J. Simpson thunders on." The defense says Mark Fuhrman is a racist. That's what they've been saying from the very beginning of the Simpson trial. Now it's time for them to prove that claim to the jury and to call Fuhrman to account. I'm Roger Cossack, and this is OJ25.
Back on the record in the Simpson matter, all parties are again present. Jury is not present. Counsel, there are a number of legal issues we need to resolve before we resume with and complete the defense case, correct?
What I would like to do, if the court would allow us to, we'd like to play the tape for you, what you're allowing us to play to the jury as far as Fuhrman's words. And we think it's very relevant.
We basically tortured them. Those four policemen, four guys. We broke numerous bones in each one of them. Their faces were just smashed.
You weren't sure how the public was going to react and what was going to happen because it was so upsetting to hear a police officer talk like that.
The words of Detective Fuhrman on those tapes are so critical and so relevant and so essential.
There's blood all the way to the ceiling and finger marks like they're trying to crawl out of the room. It was unbelievable. There was blood everywhere. All the walls, all the furniture, all the floor. It was just everywhere.
On those tapes, you have Detective Fuhrman claiming the ability by instinct to determine who is worthy of being arrested and convicted of a crime. You have him admitting that on occasion he himself has made up the probable cause necessary to carry out an arrest.
When I left, Dana goes, "No blood, Mark. No problem. Not even any marks in it. Just body shots. You ever try to find a bruise on him? Pretty tough, huh?"
You have him describing how he believes a police officer should act immediately on his instinct and then make up the reasons later.
First thing, anything out of his mouth for the first 5 or 6 sentences is why. So, just handcuffed him and went to scenic route to the station. I keep shaking him off so they say it's true. We searched him again, found the gun. That old station, and it's got the smell of that had beaten and killed him there for years.
That was certainly a surprise to us, but we had no idea of the existence of those tapes or Fuhrman's interaction with Laura Hart McKinney at all until it was revealed to all of us.
What the public heard was so much more than what the jury heard, but that was one of the most memorable times of the defense case.
We believe there is ample reason in this record right now to believe that that is precisely what happened in this case, and we have a right to confront Detective Fuhrman.
I'm not making an excuse, nor would I ever. But I'm also not pleading for a forgiveness or laying myself down to apologize for the rest of my life. People can think what they want.
When you go into a trial, you're hopeful that you've accounted for all possibilities, what the defense might do. You try to eliminate surprises. That was a surprise.
The things that he talked about, the way that he talked about suspects, the way that he talked about minorities, the way that he talked about Black people was deeply disturbing and offensive.
I think that Mark Fuhrman was the best witness for the defense in the sense that he gave the jurors a reason to believe that there was a plot to frame O.J. Simpson.
It wasn't we who introduced the word, obviously. It was Mark Fuhrman who introduced the word. We were just using it to make sure the jury understood that this is a word that he used commonly. It just rolled off his tongue.
Now they've established that he uses it to talk about African-American people and he uses it to address African-American people directly. What more can you do to impeach? I mean, what can you do? They'd like to be doing it for the next 2 years if they could. But what is appropriate in this trial?
By sanitizing these tapes to remove the racial animus, we are depriving the jury of evidence that it needs to assess the weight that should be given to his testimony.
I heard they paid up to $200,000 for him. They also only took 14 of 28 tapes. Huh.
They are going to look at someone who is a virulent, spiteful, angry racist differently. Then they're going to look at someone who is a casual racist, who is not animated and motivated.
The defense's strategy is incompetence, racism, planning of evidence, because I am this racist and I plotted this and I'm so powerful, I manipulated all these DAs and all these policemen and everybody in the case.
Mr. Ullman is right, in a sense. You know, they will view Mr. Fuhrman as a racist if they have their way, however. Mr. Fuhrman's attitudes, social attitudes, will become the focal issue of this trial because the jury will be so inflamed it will not matter to them any longer whether Mark Fuhrman could or could not have moved the glove.
We don't, of course, have the burden of explaining how that glove got to Rockingham, but we are certainly contending it didn't get there by O.J. Simpson transporting it there.
I want you to tell me and show me where race was inserted into this investigation, arrest, or trial.
It's interesting to think about Mark Fuhrman because we saw that he said the N-word 1,000,000 times and said all of these horrible things that you would think this witness is great for the defense. But the reality is the jury didn't hear any of that. I mean, we were furious when Judge Ito, he only allowed 2, and he allowed the most benign of them.
Since this is a motion to reconsider, in making my original ruling, the court's thought process was, I think, pretty obvious, that the issue was Detective Fuhrman's use of the racial epithet in a disparaging manner. I will grant the motion to reconsider for this one particular item. I will substitute excerpt 27, so you can cue that up. All right, we'll take 10 minutes, have Ms. McKinney here.
The defense will next call Ms. Laura Hart McKinney. Stand. Good afternoon, Ms. McKinney.
Good afternoon, Mr. Cochran.
Ms. McKinney, what is your occupation?
I'm a filmmaker in residence at the North Carolina School of the Arts.
Among the thousands of pages of transcripts and trial memos, rarely is there a more pivotal moment in the trial. Court TV producers reflect on the chance meeting in 1985 when Detective Mark Fuhrman meets screenwriter Laura McKinney.
It was a meeting by sheer fate 10 years ago that caused the Simpson trial to slip into the abyss. Laura Hart McKinney, an aspiring screenwriter sitting in a Westwood cafe with her laptop computer. Mark Fuhrman, cop curious about McKinney's laptop, not yet a conventional gadget. Fuhrman approached McKinney and asked her what she was doing. She told him she was writing a screenplay about the police force.
At the time, I was thinking about developing a story about women in the police department. I asked him if he would be interested in helping me give some ideas, and he agreed.
So Pat got on his hands and knees and convinced her in 10 minutes that he wasn't guilty. And then she said, yes, in fact, I do have tapes.
And what did you tell him about the kind of conversation or about the kinds of things you wanted him to share with you regarding police work?
I told him that I wanted to write a fictional piece based on fact, and so it was very important to me that I have a really clear idea of what some police officers would say in a given situation, so that the instances that he would give me would be as factual and realistic as possible.
We have to remember I was on the department a long time. I saw a lot, I heard a lot. There's a lot of stories that take on their own life as they go down from person to person. A lot of that was like that. Some of it was imagination, and some of it was real.
Did he ever use the racial epithet, which I'll call the N-word, during the course of your conversations with him?
Yes, he did.
Can you tell the jury how many times you've counted that he used that word?
Approximately 42.
42 times?
Yes.
I was heard on a screenplay uttering the N-word 40 times. How do you pull that back? You don't. Do you apologize for it? I think that's contrite, and I think it's a little embarrassing. With regard to these two excerpts, you shared with us there's some 42 or more instances where he uses this offensive word. And this particular one, I believe, this is one where it was taped over, and we have just a transcript. Is that correct?
That's correct.
The quote by Fuhrman is, "We have no where I grew up." Do you recall him saying that?
Yes.
Is that a fair and accurate portrayal of what he said?
Yes.
Let's move down to the second incident we've been allowed to use for Fuhrman speaking.
They don't do anything. They don't initiate contact from 6 foot 5. You've got a perfect perception of the lighting.
Who said that?
Officer Mark Fuhrman.
And that was his voice? Is that right?
Yes.
It's a word that I heard often growing up as a kid, probably, but it was different to hear it in a courtroom environment where we were trying to decide a person's guilt of it or innocence at that point.
When people say, you know, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, no, at the time, you might have meant it. At the time, you were participating in something, you know, and I was participating in a screenplay. We want to make it harder hitting, more extreme.
I'm like, wow, I can't believe that they actually put this guy on the stand at that point. And of course, they say, well, okay, you know, just because there was a racist cop on there, it shouldn't be the reason why you would consider it. But of course, he was very prominent, and he played a very prominent role in the investigation itself. And so to know that he had a certain prejudice or bias against the defendant right at that point, it just didn't bode well with me and how I looked at things at that point.
In these interviews that you conducted with Mr. Fuhrman, did you ever at any time ask him to embellish or enhance what he was telling you?
Objection.
Oh.
No.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Darden.
Was it your testimony yesterday that you were offended when you heard Mark Fuhrman use that epithet?
Yes.
Now, when you met with Ms. Clark and Ms. Lewis and Mr. Hodgman and myself on August 17th, do you recall me asking you what you thought or what came to mind when you first heard Fuhrman use that epithet?
Yes, I do.
And you told me that nothing came to mind. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I don't recall how Marcia and Chris reacted at the time because I think that they knew about the tapes at some point. I think they tried to mitigate some of those things early on.
You understand if that word is the most vile word in the English language?
I think it's one of the most vile words in the English language, yes.
You think they're worse?
Yes, I certainly do. Why are we having this adversarial relationship? I don't understand that. It's a vile word. Why do I have to define it more so than it is?
Mr. Bailey, you may call the defense next witness.
Defense calls Kathleen Bell. Please, the court.
All right, Ms. Bell.
Kathleen
Do you know a person named Mark Fuhrman?
Yes, I do. The first time that I saw him, I walked down to the Marine Recruiting Center and just to say hello to the Marines, and I thought that they were in a meeting, so I just kind of tapped on the window and waved and went back upstairs.
Did you notice anything unusual about Mr. Fuhrman at that time?
I thought that he was handsome.
When you next saw Mr. Fuhrman in their office, what did you do?
I went inside the Marine Recruiting Center and I introduced myself.
I think she was trying to flirt with me and I really wanted nothing to do with her. I didn't recall our conversation, but she said that I made some racial comments.
Had you, at that time, any special reason for wanting to meet Mr. Fuhrman?
I thought that he would be interested in meeting my girlfriend, Andrea Terry.
Did you tell Mr. Fuhrman something about a girl named Andrea Terry without saying precisely what it was?
Yes, I did.
And in the course of giving him that information, did you mention the name of anyone who was a public figure?
Yes.
What was that name?
Marcus Allen.
What happened when you mentioned the name Marcus Allen to Mark Fuhrman?
His demeanor changed and his attitude toward me changed.
And what, if anything, did he say?
He said that if, when he sees a black man with a white woman driving in a car, he pulls them over.
And what did you say?
I was taken aback a little bit, and so I kind of paused and I looked at the Marines and I just said, well, what if they didn't do anything wrong?
And what did he say?
He said he'd find something.
What else was said?
I asked, what if they were in love?
And what did he say to that?
He said, that's disgusting. I just kind of paused, and then he said, if I had my way, I'd gather, all the would be gathered together and burned.
It wasn't about race. It was about who committed double murder. Didn't matter if it was a black man that was accused of killing two white people. It could have been the reverse. Didn't matter.
I know what their job is as officers of the court that are trying to protect their client at all costs to make sure that they're not railroaded by injustice and inequality in our system. I get all that. I also think they pushed the line of ethics and morals far beyond what their role was.
And what was your reaction when he told you that he would gather the all together and burn them?
I'm sorry. I thought that was, nobody ever said that to me before. I heard the N-word before, but nobody ever said something like that to me before. I looked at the Marines and they weren't saying anything. They kind of just shrugged their shoulders, and so I kind of got teary-eyed and I left. I said that they have a police officer named Mark, and I told her that he had a racial problem and that I thought they should know.
Did you ever follow up on that call or go see anyone?
No, I did not.
Were you asked to do anything further by the woman at the other end of the police line?
No, not at all. It's kind of like a local pub and almost like a Cheers or something like that. I saw him immediately and it was very uncomfortable. So I told Andrea that is that man that I told her about, that I at first wanted to set her up with, and then I found out what he believed.
Mark Fuhrman became the focus during the O.J. Simpson trial. Whether that was intentional or unintentional, he became the focus. And if you ask attorney F. Lee Bailey, to this day, he will tell you that Mark Fuhrman intentionally made himself the focus. He claims that Fuhrman planted one of the gloves at Rockingham in order to make himself an essential witness in the case so that he would have to be called by the prosecution. At any rate, no matter how it went down, Fuhrman became the focus, and this case that was about the deaths of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman suddenly became focused on racism.
I asked her if we could leave. She said, okay, and I thought that she was going with me, and we started walking toward the door, and she started kind of veering off toward his table, and she kind of had a grin on her face like she was going to go get his goat or something like that.
What did you do?
I went to the door.
And how long was it before she rejoined you?
I don't think it was any more than 10 minutes, probably 5 to 10 minutes.
Did you ever personally see Mark Fuhrman again?
No, I did not.
The following program contains graphic images. Viewer discretion is advised.
At some point, did you write a letter to Mr. Cochran?
Yes, I did. I didn't want someone to be tried without all the information, and I thought that there might be some reason that they need to know that Mark Fuhrman said these things to me.
Were you acting on the advice of anyone or on your own initiative
No.
when you wrote the letter?
On my own initiative.
And did you type it yourself
Yes,
and print it out?
yes.
I thought it ridiculous that the Simpson defense team would even suggest that there might be racial motivation involved in the trial against Mr. Simpson. I then glanced up at the television and was quite shocked to see that Officer Fuhrman was a man that I had the misfortune of meeting. Mr. Fuhrman may be more of a racist than you can even imagine.
You can deduce that someone doesn't like black people and the ways in which they talk about them, right? And the ways in which he talked about them, the way in which he just used and dropped the N-word and other, kinds of horrible language to describe black folks, let you know that.
Prosecutors decidedly limited their cross-examinations of all the so-called Fuhrman witnesses. They may have taken the moral high ground by not attacking them. More likely, it was tactical. If prosecutors show these witnesses are lying, they may open the door for the defense to have more of McKinney's tapes introduced into evidence.
Detective Fuhrman did use this word, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Despite the horror and the trauma Detective Fuhrman's use of this word caused, isn't it true that you still introduced Andrea Terry to Mark Fuhrman?
I did not.
Now, you didn't want to come here and testify, is that right?
I did not want to testify.
You didn't want to help the defendant in this case?
No, I did not.
It's a strong possibility that Mr. Simpson is guilty, and it is a fact that Mark Fuhrman is a racist. I'm not looking at Mark Fuhrman's finding of evidence as any part of O.J. Simpson's guilt. I don't think that you can.
All right, let's have the jury, please. You may call the defense next witness.
Natalie, Natalie, Singer, Singer.
All right, Ms. Singer, why don't you just sit back, pull the microphone close to you, please.
I could see the writing on the wall. I was doomed. Didn't matter what. They just found something.
Tell me the circumstances of your first encounter with Mark Fuhrman.
They stopped by while they were on duty because there's no other reason for a man to pick up a date with another guy.
At some point during that evening, were you sitting in proximity to Mark Fuhrman?
Yes.
Was inquiry made by someone as to what these two officers did?
Yes.
Their work. And what was the response as to the type of work that they did?
Fuhrman said, we work with gangs.
Did he, in describing the gangs that he worked with, describe any particular race?
Yes.
Did he use an epithet well known to the world that denotes black people and begins with N?
Yes.
What was your reaction to his use of that word on your first encounter? How did you feel?
Well, in the context that that word was used in, I was shocked, stunned.
We knew that was going on all the time. I mean, people in our families had been beaten and brutalized and murdered. But you'd say it, and people would say, oh, well, you know, they're always complaining. They always want to be the martyr.
Is it fair to say that the description of the way the N people were treated, according to Fuhrman, was abusive?
Absolutely. He said after he did what he said he did, he said, oh, well, it really relieves your tension. And then this nauseating, it hits you here kind of laugh.
When you have someone like a Mark Fuhrman who has that really, I would say, choir boy image, and then he lies repeatedly about whether he has said these things, whether he has some kind of animus towards black folks.
The culture of the police department, we recognized, was not just one man. That culture is deep in LAPD. I mean, it was just brutality every day, you know, and brutality that couldn't be challenged. Somebody's always doing them something, you know. It's back to that slavery thing. I mean, that's the way people would refer to African Americans, literally, you know, fighting for our lives and for our children's lives and trying to tell a story to make people sensitive to what was going on. In today's world, it's a lot easier to comprehend because you now have so much of it on tape. You see it. You see the bias.
Did he make another reference to N people?
Yes, he did. It's okay to say that.
Yes.
He said, the only good is a dead.
Did you become aware through the news or any other means that Officer Fuhrman
Yes.
was a figure in the Simpson case?
Yes.
And how did you learn that?
The minute I saw him, I knew that that was the same man. And then I called Mr. Cochran's office, and apparently they were flooded with calls.
It's more than the hot seat for Mark Fuhrman. The jury, made up mostly of African Americans, hears him on tape using the N-word. So what will he do when he takes the witness stand? Will he admit what he said, deny it, or do something else?
Your Honor, this evidence must be considered, and you must ask the question whether you would believe this police officer in light of this evidence. We believe the most rational way for you to make that finding is for you to permit us to call Detective Fuhrman to the witness stand and engage the most powerful engine that we have to expose the truth, and that is to cross-examine him and confront him with his prior statements to Ms. McKinney.
This newly discovered evidence consists of the statements that only go in some general manner to bias and credibility, nothing specific in this case. They're statements that Detective Fuhrman made to a screenwriter. And in that context, and I'm not saying that he was role-playing when he said them, what I am saying is that he was there to impress this woman to write a Hollywood movie.
Those tapes turned the case on its head. If the prosecution had known about them, they never would have indicted OJ. Unfortunately, they were in the bathtub before they found out the water was too hot.
What do you think the likelihood is that Detective Fuhrman would be, former Detective Fuhrman would be available to testify?
There's only one way to find out, Your Honor. Let's bring him in, put him on the witness stand, and put the questions to him.
When Marcia Clark had this hot potato, the tapes came out. They're going to impeach me. I have to take the stand again. Okay, I'll take the stand again. I fly to LA, they put me up in an apartment close to the courthouse. I have security, which kind of made me laugh. I had 4 security. I go, what are you guys doing? We're gonna protect you. From what? And he goes, well, we don't know. All I did was try to get a hold of Marcia Clark so we could discuss this impending testimony. The message I left her once was, hey, look, I'll follow my sword for you. We just need to have some tactics so everybody knows how it's going to go down. So at least I can be confident enough for an objection or something, some help. You can't let me be butchered by the defense. She would never return my call.
Good afternoon, Detective.
Good afternoon, Your Honor.
You're reminded, sir, that you were still under oath. Mr. Ullman, you may proceed.
Detective Fuhrman, was the testimony that you gave at the preliminary hearing in this case completely truthful?
I was walking towards the vehicle, the Bronco. I saw a red stain above the chrome handle to the driver's door, and I believe that to be blood. I got a better view of it a little later, and then I saw when I was a few feet away that it was a glove.
Was the testimony that you gave truthful?
I wish to assert my Fifth Amendment privilege.
Have you ever falsified a police report?
I wish to assert my Fifth Amendment privilege.
When they wouldn't talk to me, I had no choice. I had to take the Fifth, or else I would have been, I'd still be on the stand. They'd still be beating me up. I mean, it's, of course, that's ridiculous, but it would be impossible to survive that. You have nobody there. It's almost like somebody's in an interrogation room, you know, constantly pounding you, and you have no constitutional rights. You can do nothing, and you think the judge's going to do anything. He actually allowed this.
Fuhrman is his own worst enemy, but he came along and took a big dump right on the top of this case and ended it when he pled the Fifth. You say, hell no, I didn't plant evidence. Who in the hell do you think you are telling me that? I don't plant evidence. That's how you respond. Not on the advice of counsel, I plead the Fifth Amendment.
I think the whole theory of planting the evidence was just a pipe dream. If you recognize that in total, I think the total number of police and police personnel that were at the scene were something like 30. In theory, Mark finds it and decides, without ever knowing whether the killer had an airtight alibi or not, to take it to his home and plant it, which would have put every single person, police personnel, at risk of losing their job, pension, etc. It's just beyond comprehension that they would have all been willing to be complicit in this act, in that act. It's just absurd to me.
When Mark Fuhrman took the Fifth over the N-word and the tapes, I was super mad, felt incredibly betrayed. I had defended him, backed him up. I respected him, I admired him, I believed him. But taking the Fifth, I think, just negated everything before. Just own it.
Is it your intention to assert your Fifth Amendment privilege with respect to all questions that I ask you?
Yes.
You have this Mark Fuhrman incident that has really torpedoed the case. You have Fuhrman pleading the Fifth, which means he doesn't want to incriminate himself. So now it's like, did he plant the evidence? Did he not plant the evidence? That's what sunk Mark Fuhrman. You know, that really is what sunk the case.
You are left with the self-incrimination clause, which stops the questioning at that point. It also opens up a giant Pandora's box. They knew that Marcia Clark was not going to do anything. She sat there like she was doing her nails. She was twisting her seat. I was looking right at her. She would not even look.
I only have one other question, Your Honor.
What was that, Mr. Ullman?
Detective Fuhrman, did you plant or manufacture any evidence in this case?
I assert my Fifth Amendment privilege.
When I pled the Fifth on one question, they put that on specifically because they knew I had to say that, because once you answer anything, now your Fifth Amendment privilege is gone.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All of us on the team felt like he had completely betrayed the integrity of the case and the evidence, and he was not welcome in that process anymore pretty much after that.
I'm just disgusted with this individual for a lot of reasons, but he got himself into this. Nobody did this. Fuhrman did this to himself.
The first level on perjury is it has to be relevant. Does it go to the matter of fact in the case? And then is it material? Would it go to prove or disprove the guilt or innocence of the defendant? Well, you don't have to be but in law school for 15 minutes before you can answer that.
The only guy I know of, certainly in my career, that's ever pleaded guilty to perjury in a murder trial while the trial was going on, being the lead witness cop. That was a tumultuous event right out of Perry Mason. I couldn't have scripted it any better.
I should have fought it. I should have sold my house and used every dime I had. But even when my attorney says, you fight this, we're looking at $100,000 before we even get close. Hindsight's 20/20. It's either that or I should have never been born, one or the other.
Mr. Darden?
Well, Your Honor, as the court may have already noticed, we have sat here, we have taken it on the chin. I think the defense has clearly established that Fuhrman is a racist.
I won't lower myself to grovel about if I'm a racist or I'm not. I live with my own mistakes. I was the most investigated law enforcement officer in the history of the United States. They filled a room the size of this area where cardboard boxes with every arrest and every report I ever wrote. They went through every one. What did they find? No racism. Not a word. Not a peep.
Mark Fuhrman could have easily said, hey, I'm a person of my time. I'm growing. I'm developing. I'm sure I've said some things that are terrible. I'm a human being. He didn't say any of that.
At some point, it gets to be too much, and at some point, I think this court, and I think the jury certainly as well, may well lose focus as to what the real issue is here in this case. The real issue is O.J. Simpson and what he did the night of June 12th.
Ron and Nicole were lost in this process for sure. The victims were an afterthought. Nicole, by the nature of the relationship that she had with the killer and because part of the motive was domestic violence, and she was a far bigger presence. My brother was collateral damage. But overall, yes, Ron and Nicole were nothing.
We are, in fact, trying the case of people with O.J. Simpson. Mark Fuhrman hasn't been arrested. He hadn't been in jail for 14 months. What Mark Fuhrman did on June 12th is what's important, and we're going to link it up.
Everything that they wanted to accomplish today, I think, is done. Now, let's get back to the matter of trying O.J. Simpson for killing these two people.
But you've not heard from one African-American who was the focus of this man's genocidal talk. And he lived it.
You put me in an awful position when you ask me to argue to you why an African-American shouldn't be allowed to testify in front of this jury judge.
Well, Mr. Darden,
sincerely,
I apologize to you for putting you in that position, but you're a professional. You and I have known each other for years and years and years. I know you're up to it. I don't envy your position, but nor do I envy my own.
Hodge, H-O-D-G-E. Do you have occasion to see or interact with a person by the name of Mark Fuhrman?
Yes, sir, I did.
At some point, were you placed inside of a police vehicle?
Yes, sir, I was.
And did Officer Fuhrman say something to you?
Yes, sir, he did. Officer Fuhrman turned around, looked at me, and told me, I told you we'd get you.
Can you describe for us the tone of voice that he used?
anger, hatred, just something from deep inside, if you would, just very ugly.
Can you describe for the jury how you felt?
Belittled, scared, very, very angry.
Mr. Hodge, did you complain to the LAPD about the manner in which you were arrested by these two officers?
Yes, sir.
Nowhere in this internal affairs complaint is it mentioned that you complained of Fuhrman's use of any epithets. Is that correct?
No, sir.
It was typically their word against the police, and often their word didn't carry nearly as much clout as the word of the police.
Now, with regard to these documents that Mr. Darden showed you, did you notice anything unusual about the pages? Did you look at the pages and look at the numbers of those pages?
It goes from page 6 to page 17.
You know what happened to pages 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and 16?
No, sir, I would have no idea.
Mr. Hodge, is there any doubt in your mind that in the month of January of 1987, Detective Fuhrman referred to you as
Sir, there's no doubt in my mind whatsoever.
A lot of what we think we know
ruined certain things in my life. They decided that they were going to use those to their own benefit, for their own purpose, for their own money, for their own greed, to get a vicious, savage murderer off. It hurt the department, which hurt me more than the trial, because all the people that I knew on the department, all the people I worked with were still there. And I was leaving. I'll never be okay. I've done right by a lot of people. So this is what I will be remembered for, so be it.
The destruction of Mark Fuhrman as a witness for the prosecution is now complete. His role in history extending far beyond this trial. Coming up, the prosecution takes another run at trying to put the bloody gloves back onto the hands of O.J. Simpson. That's next on OJ25. I'm Roger Cossack.